Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Crash Zoom. I'm Sammie Purcell, Associate Editor with Rough Draft Atlanta, and I'm here with Aaron Strand, recently returned from Roma, and we're here. How you doing, Aaron?
I am doing great, Sammie. It's great to see you. Great to be back in the saddle, back in the podcasting saddle.
Back on the mic.
I know, it's been so weird not speaking to you every week for like the past 3 weeks. It's been strange.
Right. It's been so strange. I'm happy to get back, back into practice. I hope my chops aren't too rusty, but ready to do this. Had some great interviews while you were gone, so that was awesome.
Yeah, I've been seeing them come across my feed. My commitment to not getting on Instagram during my trip to Rome, I didn't do great on that.
You didn't do good at all. You kept sending me things and I was like, stop.
But here's the thing, Sammie. I'm married to the game. What can I say? I am married to the game. Yeah, I was like in the middle of our Rome trip and I was sending stories to Sammie like, we should talk about this. And finally she was like, stop sending me text messages. Focus on your wife and your trip.
And your trip.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It looks so amazing. I'm glad that you weren't completely off Instagram so I could semi-follow you. So thank you for that.
Yes, I did. I was able to put out some of the photos. I mean, look, I'll just get right into it. A little vacay recap. This is Crash Zoom. We talk about movies. We talk about film industry. Sammie's usual spiel. But I'm going to get right into the real important stuff, which is my trip to Rome. It was fabulous. My wife and I had such a good time. This was our combined. So it was her birthday. It was Shub's birthday. It was our anniversary, which is actually today, the day that we're recording.
Yay.
It was our baby moon because we are expecting another daughter in September. We didn't get to take a baby moon for our first kid, so we owed ourselves this one. And then finally, it was Mother's Day. Of course, how could I forget the last holiday that we rolled all into one delicious cannoli of a vacation. We actually can't eat cannolis because they have egg in them, but and we're vegetarian, we don't eat egg. So, but anyway, the trip was fantastic. We just stayed in the city of Rome. And yeah, I mean, it was like great food, great art. We did some of the touristy things, but also just like tons of walking. Shub, who's like 6 months pregnant, was like such a trooper. We like logged like 10 miles of walking a day or something like that. It was just incredible. Yeah. I mean, the food was the real highlight. We kind of like balled out for dinner, every single night. And we're pretty good at it at this point, but we were able to find like a lot of vegetarian options that like really worked with our dietary restrictions. And Italy has also gotten really good about labeling allergens for tourists and like non-Italians alike. So it was a lot easier than even like traveling to Italy than just like 5 years ago.
Yeah, good for them. No, the allergy stuff is always so tough. I studied abroad with a girl who had like a terrible pine nut allergy, and it was like a nightmare. We were in Spain, but it was just like a nightmare trying to figure it out everywhere. So that's really good. Yeah,
totally. Now, granted, the focus was all on my wife. It was it was wifey focused, as it should be.
Turn into a wife guy,
Dude, I mean, listen, this trip was for her. I wanted to make her happy. So there wasn't a lot of opportunities to go to the cinema. We visited some of the like famous cinemas of Rome, or like their art house cinemas. And we were looking at the schedule, but like they were showing honestly a lot of Italian movies that wouldn't have English subs. So the scheduling was really, really hard. There was a few times where we were like, we could actually make it to a movie, and there just wasn't anything playing that we could have seen. But it was still cool to go and visit the cinemas. But then I do have to shout out, because on the last day we were walking around Piazza Navona, and it was actually Shub that stumbled into this shop that was like in the side of an ancient building. I mean, exactly how you would imagine Rome, like little side street, under this old brick archway, and looked in, and it was like, oh, I think there's a bunch of cinema books in here. At first it was postcards on the outside, and I walked in, and yes, it was a cinema bookshop. It was called the Overlook Bookshop. And a
Wow.
lovely young woman named Jasmine helped me out, because not only did they have tons of like books about cinema and directors, but on the main table they had binder after binder after binder of vintage Italian ads for classic American and foreign films. And they also had some Italian films. So I started nerding out. The first thing I was like, show me your Wertmuller. And so she was like, went on this quixotic mission trying to find a Lena Wertmuller poster, and she did finally find one, but it wasn't actually an original. It was like a recreation, so I was kind of not feeling that, but I started digging through these binders. I spent hours. This was actually like maybe the biggest time where I ignored Shub, because for some reason she was terribly allergic to the shop, so she had to step out and was like sneezing, and then there was like all this cigarette smoke that she was like trying to avoid because she's pregnant, and she also just hates the smell of cigarette smoke, so she was like absolutely miserable as I nerded out for about an hour in this store searching for the posters. I ended up I got an original ad for the Godzilla movie Invasion of the Astro Monster, which was awesome, and then a original poster for Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, I think for probably the re-release in the mid-60s. So I got these two original posters, talked about movies with Jasmine for a while, all while my wife was miserable out on the streets of Rome on her last day. So she suffered for my art as usual at some point.
As it is.
But shout out to the Overlook Bookshop. This place was amazing. They had so much cool stuff. If you find yourself in Rome, it is a must see. I gotta recommend it.
Oh, I'll have to check it out. But okay, if you've never listened to Crash Zoom before, this is not a travel podcast. Just doing a little recap there. But if it's your first time listening to us, welcome. We're so glad you're here. In Crash Zoom, what Aaron and I do here on this podcast is talk about what's going on in the movie industry on a big picture level and try to break that down and talk about why it matters to the indie artist. But before we get to that, and I feel like your answer is going to be not much because like you just got back, but have you been watching anything lately? Did you like make time to see any movies in Rome, or is it just like nada?
Oh my God. Well, we're going back a ways because we haven't been podcasting. So, I mean, I saw so much stuff at the Atlanta Film Festival, which was great. Yeah. I mean, I could shout out all these movies that saw there, Meditate One, It Ends, Pastor's Daughter, shorts blocks after short blocks. So I did see a ton of movies. In fact, I need to log them all on Letterboxd. I like put it off, and now I'm like way behind, and it's giving me anxiety.
Gotta catch up.
The one thing I will say of sort of like movies is like, and I had been meaning to watch this for a while. I finally had time on the flight back to watch Hard Truths, the latest Mike Leigh movie.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I loved it. I mean,
I feel like the ZU movie. Yeah.
Dude,
yeah.
I mean, Mike Leigh is like such a my guy. And of course I've been meaning to see it for a long time, just never made the time to get out to the theater. But talk about it's just like nobody else makes movies like this and about that subject matter, and the gall and the daring for Marianne Jean-Baptiste and Mike Leigh to take on this character, a character who is like so miserable and curmudgeonly.
So deeply, yes, curmudgeonly is a good word. She's so deeply unlikable.
I mean, she has like it's like a portrait of someone with borderline personality disorder.
Yeah,
and they don't even offer her this like sort of faux like Charles Dickens redemption arc,
right?
But they do capture something deeply truthful and empathetic about this person, and for them to be able to do that, it's like threading the finest needle through a narrative needle's eye. I mean, it's just like it really felt magical watching it. I'm so glad I watched it. And shout out to Delta, honestly, for programming Hard Truths on the international flight.
That's such a funny plane pick I feel like my plane picks are usually like, I'm literally never gonna sit down and watch this anywhere else. Like, I think the last time I was on a plane, I watched like A Quiet Place Day 1, which was better than I thought it was gonna be.
Yeah.
And then I watched Joker Follow You Do, which sucked.
Yeah. Joker Follow You Do.
It's like stuff, right? Oh, so bad.
Knock it out on the plane. Totally.
Knock it out. Get it out of the way.
But honestly, I'm so broken record here. Thanks to Delta's like art house programming, I have really caught some like great really caught up on some great art house titles that like I've been meaning to see and just haven't gotten around to it on these flights. And so while I used to just go for the like Space Jams and like the action movie type stuff to kill time. Now I've been dabbling into the art house fare and have caught myself like tearing up and crying on the airplane like a few times.
Oh, it's so much easier to cry on an airplane too. I feel like, I don't know, you're like, it's a really vulnerable place.
Wow. I've never really thought about it like that.
Yeah. I remember, I don't fact check me on this, but I remember like I was reading something about, it's like this article, clickbaity, like, why do you cry like easier on an airplane? And it is something about like altitude. Like you just like are a little more like loose, I guess, or like you're just a little more susceptible to like that kind of like strong physical reaction.
Maybe something to do with the pressurized cabin, perhaps. I don't know. And maybe it's like why you get drunker on an airplane. You're more prone to crying. My God, I never thought about it.
And that is why I cried during Trainwreck a few years ago on a plane, because it's easier to cry.
Yeah, sure, Sammie.
Yes,
sure.
That's exactly why.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
But what about you? Yeah, what have you been watching?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, one of them is right here because I got the Criterion that just came out. I watched The Umbrellas of Cherbourg for the first time, if I want to be really French about it. And I loved it. I thought it was awesome. I love it's just like the most operatic shit out of the most like normal of circumstances, which it was just lovely. I bought the vinyl off of eBay like immediately. I thought the melodies are so beautiful. The colors are obviously incredible.
Yeah.
And then speaking of musicals, I've been watching a lot of pro shot musicals lately. So Next to Normal, which is an older musical, I think it came out in like the late 2000s maybe, or like mid 2000s. But there's a new production on the West End, and that pro shot is available free on PBS right now. And it is so well done. Next to Normal is a great musical. I also watched David Byrne's American Utopia recently, which was directed by Spike Lee.
Sick.
Which
yeah.
Like, I don't know why I put it off so long. I knew I would love it. But I just want to shout out PBS, like support PBS, because great performances is such an amazing thing that they do. Like theater and Broadway and the West End, it's so difficult for most people to afford to go, and they just like put them right in your living room for free, and it's a really, really awesome service. And this Next to Normal pro shot is available, I think, free on PBS on their streaming app until June 30th or July 1st. So check it out if you are able. It's really, really good.
Super cool. And yes, second that PBS has provided me some of my most memorable television experiences of my life. Frontline, I mean, come on, Frontline's incredible.
Come on.
Come on.
Right. But awesome. Great performances is like my favorite thing in the world. It's so awesome.
Yeah. We must save public broadcasting some way, somehow. From this onslaught.
All right. Well, before we do that, it's been a while since we've been here. And I think we're going to talk a little more in depth about a couple of things that have kind of happened since we've been away from the mic. But I wanted to do like a quick little, I had like a couple of little tiny headlines that aren't like quite as, important, I should say.
Sammie, I know, okay. I know there's a big elephant in the room. Let's just get it over with. And maybe this might take up the whole episode. R.I.P. Morris the alligator. I know you're sad. I'm sad. What is your favorite Morris memory, and top 5 Morris memories, and why?
Morris the alligator, the Colorado celebrity. Sorry, I had to look this up. I was like, what are you talking about? Oh my God. Well, yeah, I can't believe okay, guys, if you don't know the alligator by name, it's the alligator from Happy Gilmore. It's actually really sad. I didn't know alligators live that long, first of all. They truly are dinosaurs. Wow, so sad. Yeah, the first thing that comes up is Adam Sandler mourns the death of Morris.
Yes. I almost texted you mid-vacation saying, Sammie, we need to do an emergency pod eulogizing Morris the alligator. Yeah, stop doing everything. Get on Zoom.
Poor Morris the alligator. I thought you were going to say this might be time for our awards campaign to start, because they're going to start recognizing podcasts at the Golden Globes.
Oh,
we got to start campaigning, Aaron. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Well, between that and the announcement that global podcasting in 2024 made $7.3 billion, which was double the expectation. It's all very exciting news. Sammie, how much of that did we make?
Stuff.
And how and where are we ranking?
2 cents.
Where are we ranking in the Golden Globes chase?
I think if we really put our boots in the ground, like Timothée Chalamet style, we could really make this work. Let's get on College Game Day.
Okay.
Let's be courtside at the next game.
I'm going to ride my Lime bicycle to wherever I can find a camera.
I think so. That'd be a good idea.
Okay.
I'd like to see that, actually.
Okay. All right. Got to step my outfit game up.
Well, speaking of outfits, I had to bring this up because it actually, like, I don't know why. It kind of made me mad. The new Cannes dress code rules.
Oh my God, I know.
You've seen this?
Oh, I have.
It kind of made me mad. How dare you make Halle Berry change from a voluminous dress into a less voluminous dress? But so I was actually really mad about this because so basically it's like you can't wear big dresses anymore. Like they have rules on like long trains and stuff. And that is supposedly for like theater comfort. But I'm kind of like, I don't know. If Halle Berry is in France at Cannes and she wants to wear like a big dress, let her wear a big dress. I get like banning hats, like if you can't see over people, or like banning big hairstyles or something like that. But I'm sort of like, she's going to be sitting next to people who are with her anywhere. Like anyway, they're not going to be bothered by her big dress. Like, you know.
Yeah.
And then the other one was no nudity, which I'm like, grow up, France.
It seemed like a very un-French thing to do.
That's what I thought.
But
yeah.
I do recognize like the increasing shock value and like potential sort of, you know, abusive undertone, certainly with like the whole Kanye Bianca Censori like
sure.
stuff.
Yeah.
That like people are gravitating towards this sort of nudity, sheer dress nudity for the shock value, and because it gets it's so internet engaging, and if I understand that potentially their motivations were really like, we really want this to be about the art and like celebrating the art and like not about this sort of like hype beast kind of clickbait sort of thing.
Right. But I do think there's an argument to be made that like, this is so, we're going on a tangent, but that like, you know, fashion like is art in a way. And like, yes, like, you know, the dresses can be like clickbaity, like, I don't know, Gigi Hadid having like a sheer gown on the red carpet. I get it. Like everyone's like, her nipples are out. I don't know. I'm sort of like, fashion should be avant-garde. We're in France. Like, let everyone, maybe it could be case by case basis. I don't know. Let everyone kind of have fun is my sort of
I totally agree with you. It also does it's just weird to like institute these two dress code rules that are like only affecting women, like within the festival. And they were under explained, let's put it this way, in terms of why they would even institute this.
Yeah. And then the only other thing I thought was funny that we should kind of mention before we start deep diving is HBO Max is HBO Max again.
HBO's back. Oh my
gosh.
Full circle. Yes. Yes.
How's your Zaslav stock doing?
Well, you know, I mean, now that Zaslav has earned this little spot in my heart, you know, I'm going, yes, Zaz, yes, see the light. Bring back HBO. No, I think, I mean, they made a right decision, but my God, was that a stupid detour that they went on? And
so dumb.
I mean, just what the hell were they thinking? I mean, we're just absolutely ridiculous. Total dereliction of duty by Zaslav and the board. The near destruction of the brand of HBO was just such a self-own and so unnecessary. So, I mean, great that they've seen the light, but it's, you know, the stock price is still down, you know, 2/3 from what it was before the merger. So, not looking great. Not looking great. Right. Last thing that I want to throw out here in terms of our rapid rundown of, because like, of course, I go on vacation for 1 week. We missed 2 weeks of podcasting. Everything happens. It was like the biggest news 14 days possible. So the DHS is considering a citizenship reality show. Did you see this?
Yes, I did.
Oh my God.
This is Hunger Games territory. Like, this is ridiculously disgusting. Yeah.
I mean, just wow. I mean, shocking. The fact that it could even be floated with the slightest, without I mean, that it's not parody. I mean, it's just we are on such a race to the bottom in terms of on so many levels. But my God, just absolutely disgusting headline. Kristi Noem, go fuck yourself. And hope to God this never sees the light of day.
Absolutely. Speaking of races to the bottom, we got to talk about tariffs. Well, not really tariffs,
boy.
but the hopefully, fingers crossed, not really tariffs, but the kind of chaos that they wrought. So on May 4th, you probably saw this. It's been on the news for a long time. Donald Trump, our president, tweeted a lot of things, or not tweeted, I guess it's True Social. So posted that he wanted to authorize the Department of Commerce to begin the process of instituting a 100% tariff on any and all movies coming into our country that are produced in, quote, foreign lands. So this is posted on True Social on May 4th. I think, is that the day you left?
I was literally on the plane when I texted you.
Yes.
I was we were about to take off, and I was like, holy shit.
Right. I was you and my editor were both like, did you see this?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Oh, God.
So I guess, I think everyone kind of knows, the bare bones of this by now, but just to, go over a little bit of stuff. The White House, pretty much kind of immediately walked this back and were we don't know what this would look like, stop, and then, Trump spent the next few days calling Gavin Newsom an idiot, and everyone was just trying to kind of pour water on this little fire that the Post started. And every article you read about this kind of thing, including my own, which is on roughdraftatlanta.com, experts either politely say it wouldn't work or just flat out say that it wouldn't work. Because what does this mean? A tariff on a movie produced outside the US. Movies have so many different moving parts. It's a service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then on May 6th, after that, Jon Voight, who's one of Donald Trump's special ambassadors to Hollywood, that also includes Sylvester Stallone and Mel Gibson. Although Sylvester Stallone will come back. Mel Gibson has been very quiet about this whole thing. He's not really shown his face.
He's working on the resurrection of the Christ. I mean, so he's been absent from this all-time blunt rotation.
Yes, he has. Wow. Can you imagine? That's so scary. So Voight, his proposal was published in Deadline. I believe a representative for him was that's a working thing. It's not supposed to be published yet, etc. So that mentions a tax credit as well as, I think, 120% tariff on movies that could have been produced in the US but weren't. Who knows what that means? And it also mentions an American cultural test, which I believe is something that they do in the UK. But that wording really raises my hackles, especially coming from this particular crew. And, I think the biggest thing that sort of came out of this, and there's kind of a lot to dive into, is basically that this is all a bunch of gobbledygook, obviously, in this post, but he is playing on a very real concern. We've talked a lot on this podcast about how productions are moving overseas, and LA production is at an all-time low. Georgia production has been pretty slow kind of since these strikes that happened a couple of years ago. And so it's interesting how Hollywood has sort of responded to this. And this is sort of the last thing I'll say before we start really kind of chit-chatting back and forth about this. But Hollywood power players, and this is from the newsletter, The Dailies, have essentially sent President Trump a tax wish list sort of in response to this. So this doesn't mention tariffs. I looked in the doc. I searched for the word tariffs. Tariffs are not mentioned in this document. But instead, they're proposing basically more tax cuts for filming in the United States. And this is from Jon Voight. He's there again. Sylvester Stallone signed this letter, and a bunch of different union reps and studio execs also signed the letter. So, that was a big, long recap of what's been kind of a couple weeks worth of chaos. But, how was it for you kind of coming back from Roma and being here I am. What's going on?
Oh, man. Well, this is, it's like you said, it's a very important conversation. I mean, it's a conversation that should be had on the simple ground floor basis that America is losing its production work overseas, primarily to the UK and Canada, but then to a lesser degree, some, these other sort of Eastern European countries who are all offering these 40% tax incentives. They have socialized medicine, which is like the biggest determining factor that allows them to keep their labor costs down, is that they don't have to factor in private health insurance. And also they have looser labor restrictions. All of these things make the cost of labor in the United States incredibly high. And so people go over for the to the UK and Canada for these big tax breaks. And it's a huge problem. I mean, it's like, there's no doubt about it. We've been talking about it for months on this show. Everybody's been talking about it. So it's good to see this sort of break into the mainstream. I mean, even just the other day, I think just yesterday, actually, on NPR, their news website, the leading headline was sort of like explaining why this is a big deal. Now, when it comes to tariffs, everything that I read and everything that I hear, and while this does align with my own political biases, it also just seems to be the cold hard facts that, like, this idea of 100% tariff on films made in foreign lands, this is ridiculous. This is not a good that's moving through a port. This is traditionally, like you said, has been considered a service. How do you even determine a tariff? How do you even determine what to tariff if a movie is partially shot in the U.S. but partially shot overseas because a scene is set overseas? Like, what? How are you going to do, how are you going to do this? If a movie is conceived of, financed, and greenlit and cast in the United States, but shoots in the UK on a soundstage, how do you determine what to tariff and what not to tariff? Does this apply to foreign films that are being imported into the United States? I mean, because at the end of the day, America is like, runs a like 1,000% exporting surplus in terms of film and television. We make so much more money exporting than we do importing. Like, we're crushing it. And so in this regard, tariffs would only raise the costs and would actually do the opposite of what they're intended, which is to spur more production. This would decrease studios looking to produce more film and television, because all of a sudden it would become more expensive. I also dove into the Voight memo, the 5-page Voight white pages. And it does seem tariffs were a minor part within his sort of rundown. It definitely seems to be the part that Donald Trump seized a hold of in order to grab the news cycle. He loves
the word, I think. I don't know. And the word is like grabbing the news cycle. You're right.
It makes everybody freak out, and because no one really knows what it means. And it's also like, it's just one of these stupid things that he can say. His base feels like he's doing something, and then over the course of 4 months, lawyers can deliberate about what this actually looks like and ultimately come to the conclusion that just doesn't make any sense. But by that point, everyone's moved on to the next crisis that he has, chummed the water with. So we're in this ridiculous news cycle. Now, I did think there was a lot of things within the overall Voight working document that were definitely worth attention. So, like, he proposed, number one, first and foremost, a 10% federal tax incentive, like a base incentive, and that would apply to every state within the union. Now, if a state does not have its own film tax incentives, then that federal incentive would automatically bump up to 20%. So he's basically saying the federal government, and this is quite radical, that the federal government should subsidize American film and television, which on the one hand is something that we've been arguing about or I have been advocating for a long time. Every European country has these incredible film funds. They fund all these amazing projects. To do it in this American way through the tax system, it doesn't have exactly the same desired effect as some of those European systems, but still, it would be the biggest federal subsidy for an arts effort since the New Deal, which would be quite incredible. Now, as to who that goes to, you brought up the all-important American culture test, which was just thrown in here as a qualifying condition in order to meet, or in order to get these federal tax incentives. And what the fuck is an American culture test? I know they reference the British culture test. I didn't know existed, and I was sort of like, whoa. I had like no idea that was a thing. Yes. And the British culture test, I don't know if he included it at the bottom of his memo, of his white pages. it's pretty innocuous, but given everything that this administration has been about in terms of censorship and, trying to wield these carrot and sticks in a really sort of humiliating fashion, I find it hard to believe that an American culture test would not be used as essentially the Hays Code dressed in an American flag.
Right. I mean, because when you look at this, like UK one, like there's one, for example, section B, it says like, quote, the film demonstrates British creativity, British heritage, and or diversity. And you kind of read that and you're like, okay, like that sounds great. But like sub the word American in, and it's like, well, who is interpreting what American heritage is? Who is interpreting what diversity means in America? And that's where I think you run into trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I find it so ironic that John Voight, of all people, would write this, when I would find it hard to believe that if Midnight Cowboy was submitted for an American culture test today, not to mention, including the subject matter of a gay hustler in New York City struggling on the dregs of society with a British director attached, I might add, I seriously doubt Midnight Cowboy would even qualify for the American culture test if it was submitted in 2026, say. So it does have a certain reek of censorship and control.
Yeah. Did you catch the like slight little dig at California, like right at the top?
No, wait, what was it?
I just think it's funny, like in the very beginning when he's like when he's just talking about the tax incentives, it says, let's see here. Base rate of 10% on top, et cetera, enhance incentives 5 through 10% for shooting in certain economically depressed enterprise zones. And in the parentheses, it says, including California. Like, it just, I feel like maybe it's just me. I feel like that's like such a little like slight, like, yeah, we're talking about you too, economically depressed over there. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I kind of chuckled a little. I was like, damn.
when I saw that, I thought it was sort of like, well, they're called. I actually do feel like he was kind of fighting for California and like fighting for like returning production to California, and that's why that was included. I think you might be right that there's probably like a little double-edged sword there.
A little double-edged sword, because I do think you're right. Like I think there does appear to be like not just a push for like production to come back to the States, but back to California specifically. I mean, every page of this little white pages starts with "Make Hollywood Great Again," like, Yeah. So it does have a certain California bent for sure.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that was included here, and this is like way more boring, and we're really getting into some nerdy weeds when we're talking about like effective tax rates and like tax rollovers. But the other most important thing that I thought was like an actual, potentially real solution to some real problems here was basically arguing that the corporate tax rate would be decreased down to 15%, and a 15% effective corporate tax rate on film production studios, and also more importantly on movie theaters. So this would be a decrease in their current corporate tax rate, and they would have the ability to diffuse tax losses over a 5-year window, which really helps the film industry because, and I can attest this even on the absolute smallest level, when you're in production, you're spending all this money, you have this huge tax burdens or, huge tax write-offs. And then the next year you're not in production and your cash flow is like essentially dead. And if you could distribute your losses and gains like over a 5-year span, it would really enable you to create a more even portrait of your finances, whereas a more traditional business, has steady cash flows and losses like throughout the year. And then last but not least, they included a provision where movie theaters could write off facility improvements on their taxes. The fact that this isn't already in the tax code, or like that no accountant can like loophole this, is genuinely shocking to me. We talked about this a while ago, how NATO, I know they've rebranded themselves Theater International or Theater Theaters,
I can't remember.
Theaters United,
Sorry.
maybe whatever the NATO's new name is. They announced this whole thing of like, oh, we're going to reinvest $2 billion into our facilities, and that's going to include all these like extra activities and like zip lines like through the theaters and like all this like dumb shit. And then when it actually came down to it of like what they're going to do with it, it's like, half the speakers are broken in our theaters across the country.
Right.
Like our screens are like crusting and like falling off. The seats are disgusting. It's like just the most basic of repairs. And these are huge expenses for theaters. So the fact that they can't write off these expenses, not to mention the fact how expensive it is to fix and replace the projectors within the theaters across the country. So I think this would be I think this would be a really good thing to do. Now, this speaks though to what you were talking about, which is this letter that all these people piled in. And I do got to say, it gives me the ick, man. It gives me the ick. I get that it's like good that people are coming together and like asking for things, but at the same time, like this is how fascism works. Like you throw out these like weird amorphous promises, and then all of a sudden everyone falls in line with their hands out saying, yes, sir, we'd love some tax write-offs. We'd love some federally subsidized funding. Oh, sure, we'll submit to a citizenship test if you give us 20%.
Yeah, like I do think part of this probably was just in response to the tariff thing in particular, because that is sort of what people are latching onto. Because again, this letter is like, and nowhere does it mention tariffs. Like it's like,
no,
please, like it feels more like a how about this instead, which is kind of how Gavin Newsom responded, like sort of at the very beginning. Well, he was like, well, no, how about this? He also called it quote, or not him, but a representative for him said something like, well, it must be distraction day down at the White House, which I did find kind of funny.
Ooh,
but
yes, queen.
but it's one of those things where I'm like, I guess I'm glad like you guys are asking for this now, but like they've all known that this is like a problem. Like I feel like we've been talking about this for like the past few months. And I get like that is the power of like the presidency is like he can post something dumb and everyone's like, oh, we gotta like hustle on it now. Sorry, I just moved my hands a lot. But I don't really understand like why. And I guess like we don't see the behind the scenes and stuff. I guess I'm just like, why weren't you asking for this stuff before? Like why? And like, or, grassroots organizations like we talked about, I think it's called like LA First is the name of that group, that organization that we talked about like a few weeks ago. And like grassroots organizations have been like asking for this kind of stuff. And I know that like Gavin Newsom has been like pushing for this kind of stuff as well, but like it's just sort of like, again, I guess that's just the power of the presidency.
Yeah,
but I wish everyone was sort of working on it beforehand.
But this speaks to, so first of all, I mean, I think that this ultimately comes down to that the film and television industry has not had a reason to have a major lobbying effort within Washington, D.C. And the lobbying infrastructure for film and television is nowhere near as robust as these other industries that get massive handouts and tax benefits and all sorts of corrupt shit from the government. And unfortunately, the American system is completely pay to play. I mean, because of Citizens United and because dollars are treated as if they are votes and they're given a voice within this system, it's whoever spends the biggest lobbying that wins. I mean, the largest lobbying effort in the country is healthcare, and healthcare, surprise, is the biggest part of the federal budget. So I think it's really comes down to sort of what sort of lobbying effort and what sort of lobbying dollars are being put behind this. And really, we also have a demonstrable record over the past his previous term and currently, that like Donald Trump's attention span is incredibly small. And if you can capitalize on the brief window of attention span that he has, and maybe you'll get lucky enough to get your shit in front of him and he'll write an executive order and potentially do something about it. I can't really imagine there's that much more going on other than a lack of lobbying dollars and an attempt to capitalize on his attention span. But it ultimately comes back to like people are playing into his power and falling in line in one way or another.
Do you want to talk about Fin-Syn a little bit?
Oh, yes, of course, Fin-Syn. We got to talk about Fin-Syn. Talk about
whenever I read that term, I think the Irish political party like immediately, which is like flip-flopped and pronounced a little bit differently. Again, I've been too much in like Northern Ireland world for this whole year, really. But yeah, I guess let's dive into it. So,
oh my God, talk about nerdy in the weeds shit. We're talking about fucking Fin-Syn. My God, buckle up, folks. This is mostly coming from an Ankler article from Leslie Goldberg. So another part of John Voight's sort of proposal here is he wants to reinstate the financial interest in syndication rules, aka Fin-Syn, fun little term, which was first imposed by the FCC back in 1970. So this would prevent streamers and broadcast networks from owning all of their programming. And one of the funny things about this is I believe it was instituted at first, or taken away, I should say, by Richard Nixon because he was unhappy with the way that news organizations were operating. So, a little bit of a irony there, I guess you could say. But kind of running through this article basically kind of goes through who would sort of be the winners and losers if this were to be reinstated. And I was sort of curious, like, do you think there's any sort of possibility that this actually happens? The article seems super skeptical, and I don't know if I know enough about it to like really have a good opinion on whether it's super possible or not. So I'm just kind of going off how the journalist feels at this point, but I was curious about your thoughts. Yeah, well, let's just to back up a little bit. I just want to provide a little bit more context. So, what Fin-Syn was?
In
1970, and it was instituted in 1971. Richard Nixon and his cabinet at the FCC instituted rules that, at the time, there were only three major broadcast networks. There was ABC, NBC, and CBS, and they instituted a rule that those networks could not outright own their primetime programming, and they had to divest from their primetime programming. That it was an unfair monopoly to allow these broadcast networks that were just making massive amounts of money from having this triopoly of market share, and saying that it was unfair for them to own their programming. This opened the door for independent television producers such as Tori Spelling, among others, to come in and pitch shows that they then owned the rights of. And this became very beneficial as cable took off in the 1980s, because these people were able to not only make their shows and put them on a broadcast network during prime time because there were slots available, they then owned the shows that they could sell in syndication going forward, and it made millionaires out of independent television producers. Now, that's a lot easier when there are three broadcast networks in the entire country, as opposed to now where we've got broadcast networks. We still have cable networks. They're dying, but they're still out there. And then, of course, we have this crazy world of digital distribution and streaming and all this sort of stuff. Now, so to go back to your question, is this possible? I don't know how it would possibly work in streaming, but I do think that this is possible because this would to reinstitute Fin-Syn would be a major blow to the legacy broadcast networks. And I do think that Donald Trump has a personal vendetta against the legacy broadcast networks. And if he so chose, this would be an incredible way to stick it to them and potentially deliver a death knell to the legacy broadcast and particularly news organizations that he seems to be perpetually in beef with.
Yeah, I'm sort of interested. Like, this article kind of mentions that in particular, it having the potential to really hurt like broadcast networks and sort of exacerbate this move that we're seeing, which we'll kind of jump into a little bit later, from like live programming in sports, or to live programming in sports, sort of away from scripted originals, like maybe make that move like a little faster. But she also mentions that there's been like, and this makes sense, like when you bring up Tori Spelling, etc. Not Tori Spelling, Aaron Spelling. Woo, wrong person. Wrong family member.
Spelling?
I think I just said Tori Spelling.
I think I might have said Tori.
You
said
Aaron,
too.
Did you?
I think I said Tori.
We met Aaron. Sorry.
Both got Tori Spelling on the brain. Aaron Spelling, my
Tori
God.
Spelling on the
and
brain.
of all names for me to forget here. Good God.
Yeah. And this makes sense. So this makes sense given the Aaron spelling of it all, but there's been like a low key push by indie producers to sort of revive this, like kind of for the reasons that you were saying, right? So I don't know.
I
I, Go
but
ahead.
yeah, but like they're talking about it in a sort of a return to power of independent creatives within the television
Yeah.
and the television and scripted storytelling space. And
Right.
I don't think Fin-Syn is the way to do that. I mean, I really can't imagine, because what this does would put all of the cost and, worst of all of the risk onto independent studios. What independent studio in 2025 can shoulder the weight and the cost of creating the level of content that American consumers have become acquainted to? It would
Right.
require that American tastes, and particularly like streaming network, if we're talking streaming networks or broadcast networks, that they would suddenly have to start programming and highlighting low budget storytelling, something like Mark Duplass's Long Long Night, and like putting that out there. But then they would be putting that out there when Americans have been trained on watching dramas like Game of Thrones or Succession, or like these super glitzy, super high value shows. And I just can't imagine that would take place. Not to mention that, yes, what this would do is it would there's a potential that it could further exacerbate the income inequality within Hollywood, because only the richest of the rich of independent productions could possibly afford to make television.
Right. No, and there's an interesting part kind of towards the end here where the journalist kind of talks about just what you're saying. Like there would need to be, and that's what most of the experts in this article say, I feel like, is there would need to be like a real kind of reimagining of what this would look like if it were to ever sort of come back into play, kind of for the reasons you were saying. And also, like, there's a really funny kind of quote at the end of this. It's a showrunner. I don't think they're named, which is interesting, but they essentially say, like, quote, places like Netflix would always find a way around it, like if it were reinstated sort of the exact same way that it were in the past. So it seems to me that, like, and this would make the most sense, that if this were to come back sort of into the realm of possibility, it would need to be modified heavily to account for streaming, which is really difficult. God, it's not my job, but
Yeah, I mean, we're just like the issues are so complex. We're so screwed.
Right.
The only way I possibly see a return, like, and I say return of power. I mean, we're talking about like the power has been out of the hands of individual artists within the television sphere on the whole, like since the 1950s, like since television like first started. There was like a brief few years where it was like a pretty funky place for independent artists to say something, but as soon as people started making real money on it, like it kind of went downhill. But the only way I see that this possibly that the idea behind Fin-Syn, at least in our sort of minds of like what the benefits would be, who knows what John Voight and Donald Trump are thinking. I think they're only thinking about ways to punish broadcast networks and their parent companies. But if we're thinking about it in terms of like, how do we return power to independent creators? I see the only way as instituting some sort of federally mandated minimum in terms of not only investment money that's like going back to fund independent artists, sort of like what they do in France, where if Netflix shoots a show in France or makes a show for French television, a subset of their budget has to be set aside for small time French artists. And then more importantly, maybe, is that a certain percentage of the tile space within a given streaming platform has to be devoted to independent content not made in-house. Because we've talked about this before, is that the really creepy thing about the world of streaming is that these companies not only control the means of production, but they're also controlling the means of distribution, and it's impossible for an independent creator to break through the algorithmic space, and we have no transparency, we have no insight about how it works, and you on the whole just get buried within a fire hose of shit, and there's no room for you. So without these two things being sort of mandated, I don't see any way that like a federal mandate or some sort of regulation could possibly help independent creators.
Right. Well, let's move on to our next topic, which is also something that you sent me when you were in Rome. And I'm actually really interested to hear you talk about this just because I was unaware that some of these things existed until I read this article. So this is an article from Indiewire. It's by Harrison Richland, and it's titled, "It's the Death of the Screenplay Industrial Complex, and Not a Moment Too Soon." It was published on May 6th. And essentially, it's covering the recent shutdowns of organizations like Industry Arts Coverfly and sibling platforms Screencraft, the Script Lab, We Screenplay, and the Tracking Board. So these were sites, as far as I understand it, that they offer kind of distinct services, but they did stuff like highlight talent, host events to track screenplay sales, like kind of put up your screenplay, like that's kind of like the vibe I get. It was like screenplay sites, basically, like screenplay sharing sites for writers. Like, you can help me kind of like break down that a little bit later. But this article kind of talks about how, it's like kind of a good thing, I guess, that like it's not like the end of the world that these are actually going down the wayside. And I'd love to, the article then kind of goes on to basically be like, screenwriting is in trouble, and then kind of give advice, which we can get into that if we want to, but I'm just I was kind of like, okay, but I'm sort of curious about what your thoughts on this are, just because I'm sure as a writer, you're far more familiar with these sites and their history than I am.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so the worst part about, well, actually, let me back that up. Hard to say what the worst part about being a working artist is. But one of the very bad parts about being a working artist is that you inevitably get targeted by this hope factory, the people that are selling you hope for a nominal fee. And I kind of always trace this back to the pre-peak TV era, where you had these examples of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and like these people who were just guys who were out writing scripts, and they made a pilot on their own, with just pulled themselves, just scrappy, made a pilot, and pretty soon Danny DeVito wants to star in your movie in FX. And of course, and like, granted, this, on some level, this is how Hollywood works. Is Tarantino got his script for Reservoir Dogs to Harvey Keitel, and Harvey Keitel was the one who said, "We have to make this movie, and I'm going to help you do it." And like, that's how his career got started. Like, this happens, but these myths and legends get passed around and told so many times that all of a sudden it begins to stick in your head that all I need is to just get discovered. And so because of the internet was able to connect these thousands of people who had a notion that they could write a screenplay, that they wanted to write a screenplay, that they could be screenwriters. And so it coalesced around these services, or these sort of tools, or these how to break into the entertainment industry sites, such as Coverfly, the Tracking Board, all these sorts of things. So the way it works is that like, Coverfly is like, and I have one. You could go look it up. You basically create like a Facebook profile, a social media profile. You host your scripts on this website, and then through the platform, you can submit to screenplay competitions. Now, a lot of reputable film festivals host screenplay competitions as part of the festival, and you will pay a fee to send your screenplay, have it read, judged, and maybe you'll get some sort of award at some point. And that's all fine and good, and I get that that's part of the festival process. And there's festivals that have entirely built themselves around this, like Austin Film Fest considers itself a writer's first festival, which is very, very cool. But what's fucked up is that the company that owns Coverfly, the site you're hosting it on, also owns and has like over time bought all these other screenplay competitions. So, and this is a company called Industry Arts. So you are hosting your script on an Industry Arts website that is then targeting you with ads for their own script competitions, their own promises of what is called coverage. And this is like, back in the day, if you were a screenwriter that maybe had representation or whatever, you could send your script to a studio, and then for a nominal fee, they would read it and they would give you a single piece of paper back with sort of their thoughts and feedback. And this was called getting coverage for your screenplay. And so what they've created is essentially like a fake world where you can like get read and get coverage, but is it going to like people that are going to actually make your movie? No, on the whole.
Right.
Not to say that there's not people who have gotten managers, who have gotten representation, who have found some type of traction here. But on the whole, I think that this is absolutely an exploitative hope machine. And I think what happened here is that they squeezed every bit of juice that they possibly could. This is a classic case of where you're turning the creators into your customers, and they squeezed and squeezed and squeezed until not enough juice came out, and thus we have the death of industry arts, and the death of Coverfly, which will be shutting down. And I'm gonna lose my awards that I got. One of my screenplays is a top 3%, Sammie. It's top 3%. I better take a screenshot.
How will you go on?
I better take a screenshot so I can tell everybody. Just like how people were taking screenshots of their Twitter blue check marks back before they were paid for.
I do.
Anyway, I think this is a good thing. Look, like people, we do deserve. People need ways to get their work in front of people. But what I hate is that there are so many bottom feeders within this art form that are looking to make quick money off of people's hopes and dreams. And that is essentially the core business proposition of Coverfly, of these various script competitions that they owned. Look, this does put this really coalesces power around the Blacklist, which was like the competitive site and was the site that came before. It's considered more prestigious. It's considered more professional. The Blacklist is also now doing the judging and providing the coverage for the Nichols Academy Fellowship, which is probably the most prestigious like screenplay competition within America, certainly. So this all I think the Blacklist is sort of put in an interesting position of like, how do they retain their brand identity and this sort of like the prestige that they have really earned with people sort of gravitating and leaving Coverfly and moving over to the Blacklist. But ultimately, Coverfly, nice knowing ya, glad you're dead.
Yeah. No, you said something like exploitative. I can't remember what the last word was, but it reminds me of like, I remember we read this article, like it was towards the beginning. I think it was on the Hollywood Reporter, and it was essentially just like, it was saying like salary breakdowns, I believe, if I remember correctly, but it had the tone of like, you can do it too. And da, 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 da. And I remember we both read it and we're sort of like, this is such bullshit. Like it's such a hope builder that actually leads nowhere. And this feels like a little similar in that regard to me. Or at least those kind of companies do. It's
such a problem too, because like your industry needs to have aspirational value. Like we do talk also often about that the film and television industry needs to have like aspirationalism and the aspirations and dreams of people is like really what fuels the industry. It's just that we also need to be able to call out the people who are willing to capitalize on that aspirational value without delivering anything in return. And certainly the sort of like script competition industrial complex is a major perpetrator of this harm.
Yeah. All right, I want to move through this next one a little quickly. It's not all that interesting, but I thought the Dailies newsletter at least like sort of confirmed a couple of things that we already knew, but just want to move through it really quickly. So Upfronts, which is essentially like the TV industry's ad buying conference in New York, I believe it was around May 14th, so like last week. And the Dailies newsletter did a little rundown on it, so don't want to spend too much time here. They bought ads, kind of boring, but a couple of interesting tidbits, some confirmation of stuff that we've kind of already known came out. And that's basically that scripted content, I think I mentioned this kind of up top in one of the previous subjects, is really, really going by the wayside, just dipping. So NBC has just 7 scripted series in its fall lineup, and Fox is dedicating only 4 of 15-ish, 16-ish primetime hours to scripted shows. So they're moving towards game shows, reality competitions, sports, like especially sports, live sports dominated. Like every single presentation. NBC touted a $2.5 billion NBA deal, which starts in 2026. Amazon showcased its NBA package as well. Fox highlighted its NFL streaming strategy. Disney unveiled its ESPN streamer, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. So, I mean, this has been true for a minute. We've talked about it a lot, but I just thought this little bit in the Dailies newsletter really confirmed what we've been talking about. So,
man, yeah, tough times for scripted entertainment. People are not tuning in. The stories are not delivering. It's also crazy that these people are like touting their NBA deals, considering that they're just paying for regular season games that nobody watches anyway. Seems kind of, I smell bullshit like across the board. It's interesting times. I mean, you got to go away to come back. David Lynch said that in an episode of Louis, so it must be true. And
it must be true.
So I am just waiting for the scripted renaissance, but it ain't today. It's gonna be a dark night of the soul here.
Yeah. Have you been watching the NBA playoffs, by the way? Are you rooting for any? Who are you rooting for?
Who am I rooting for? I mean, it's hard to not have my old school Knicks love.
Right. I was gonna say.
Like, well, I mean, anybody but, I mean, I'm ABC all day, every day. Anybody but the Celtics. You know what I mean? So the fact that the Celtics took such a fat L. I mean, I hate to see Jason Tatum get hurt. I never want to see that.
Yeah, that sucks.
But happy to see the Celtics lose. But then also Georgia's finest, Anthony Edwards. Can he do it?
Ant-Man.
Dude.
I know.
I mean,
I'm a little torn because I'm kind of like, I feel like the Knicks have sucked for so long, so it'd just be kind of fun. But at the same time, Ant-Man, like that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. You know? I do think that I think we're most likely heading to a Knicks Thunder finals. If I had to guess, I do think it'll be Knicks Thunder, and in that case, I do think the Knicks will get beat. I think the Thunder will win. I think the Thunder have the best shot of winning the championship. Every statistical analysis says the Thunder.
Aaron's just breaking Spike Lee's heart left and right. We'll see what happens.
I mean, wouldn't be the first time. I mean, the man's lived with a perpetually broken heart since 1973.
He's used to it.
Yeah.
He's strong.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this next one. So you guys have probably heard this. It's been kind of all over the place. I feel like it's all over my TikTok algorithm, which is interesting. But Together, the movie with Alison Brie and Dave Franco, it was at Sundance. I didn't see it, so I want to kind of preface, I haven't seen either of the movies that we're going to talk about in this next item, but they've been hit with a lawsuit. So Together was acquired by Neon in a $17 million deal out of Sundance. And this lawsuit was filed on May 13th in Los Angeles Superior Court by Studio Fest. And they're essentially claiming that Dave Franco and Alison Brie turned down an offer to star in the 2023 film Better Half that studio financed, so that Studio Fest financed. And the lawsuit accuses Franco, Brie, their agency WME, of creating their own version of Better Half together. So they're essentially saying, hey, you stole our idea, basically. And Michael Shanks is the filmmaker behind Together. So that's from a script that he wrote. And Neon, so who bought the title at Sundance, also named in the lawsuit. So I went through a bunch of stuff for this. Did you kind of go through the complaint and look at everything?
Yeah. What do you got? I'm curious. What's the smile say?
I think I'm of like two minds, because there's like a part in the lawsuit that kind of did break my heart. I think like on the surface, reading just coverage of this, because if you read this Indiewire article that I'm kind of taking from, it's from Samantha Bergeson, it essentially kind of goes down, and the lawsuit does this too, the actual complaint kind of like takes scenes from both movies and is like, this is the same, this is the same, this is the same, this is the same. And if you read that, there are moments where you're kind of like, well, that's like kind of weird, perhaps a little more than a coincidence, etc. And then at least in my opinion, and I do kind of feel, I can't imagine what it's like to be like working on something and then see another movie that is similar in your mind, and like, especially if you sent it to the people involved. I am sort of like, the thing that like really gives me pause, and I was sort of like digging into different subreddits as I was researching all this stuff. But so Michael Shanks, who's the director, filmmaker behind Together, is Australian. And apparently the way screenplays are developed in Australia, he like likely had some help from the government. So there's probably like a paper trail of when he actually started working on this. And they haven't really responded to the lawsuit, but I think WME did, and they seem like pretty like not worried about it. And that reads to me that there might be some sort of paper trail that proves like, hey, he was working on this in like, 2018 or whatever it may be, like around the same time that this other filmmaker was working on his movie. So I don't know if there's like much there here.
So we are of the same mind. I really, I think that this is bullshit. A lot of I thought the way the best sort of summation of this was done by a writer who posts a lot on TikTok and Instagram, named Nicholas Curcio, who
I saw this, I think. Yeah.
Really enjoy his content. And I think that he put it, I'm paraphrasing sort of his argument. But it's ultimately, I think, the right argument, which is that for this lawsuit to be correct, it would assume that Studio Fest submitted this script to WME with the hopes that WME was going to send this script to Dave Franco and Allison Brie. They sent an offer of $20,000 payment for each actor, which is really not getting close to sort of what their average payday would be. It then assumes that Dave Franco and Allison Brie read the script within like a 48-hour window, because I believe they got their...
I think it was 24.
Okay.
I think it was like the next day.
Yes, they got their rejection email like the next day. That means that Dave Franco and Allison Brie read the script so fast, loved it so much that they had to steal this idea and then like bring another writer in to develop this idea for them, that they were all going to do this in sort of a conniving thing, and then they were going to intentionally use elements from the original film like in their film in a sort of like blatant flouting of the rules. And all of this reads as ridiculous, because the one thing that there is an excess of in Hollywood is ideas. Like, there are millions and millions and millions of ideas. The ideas, unfortunately, there's such a surplus of them, they almost have no value, which is why we are left with like the star system that we have. The notion that these two people would love this idea so much that they would just have to have it, but not with Studio Fest. It's just sort of wrong. It goes down to the core issue of like, anytime I talk to a writer today and they have some notion about like even like people will talk about like, well, why would I ever put my scripts on Coverfly? What if somebody steals it? And it's like, dog, you talking like an amateur. Like, nobody wants to steal your script. Nobody cares about your script, and nobody wants to like take your idea and work on it. Like, ideas like these scripts take so long to work on. This is like years and years of work, and just nobody wants to do that. So I think, unfortunately, this is a unfortunate confluence of ideas. And even if Michael Shanks, the writer of Together, who, like you said, we believe that there is there seems to be a paper trail of a grant that he received from the Australian government, potentially in 2020. Which was the same year that Better Half was pitched to Allison Brie and Dave Franco. So even if he went and saw Better Half, say he saw it on its festival run in 2023, it premiered at Brooklyn Film Festival. Say he went and saw this movie and saw certain elements, such as the use of the Spice Girls song "To Become One" in the final scene or whatever, and was just like, oh, I'm gonna take that and like use it in my movie. That's not copyrightable. Like, that's not a copyrightable offense. And while it does suck for the independent creators, like, if that was the case, on the whole, like, this is a good thing that is not copyrightable.
That ideas are not copyrightable. Exactly. Because
Because, I mean, half of modern film and television is nothing but a pastiche of reference shots from previous films and television. Like, that's how this works.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that this is bullshit. I mean, it's the same thing that happened with Alexander Payne and The Holdovers a couple years ago. When he was accused by the writer of Luca of stealing his screenplay, Frisco, I think it was called. And this was immediately thrown out in court because it's just like, it is, not only is it incredibly hard to prove, but it assumes levels of like QAnon levels of conspiratorial malintent that are just not possible within the busy lives of working artists.
You have to have so much time on your hands if you're Dave Franco and Allison Brie to like read something in 24 hours, be like, well, I like it, but not with you, da 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 da. Like, you know, and they're both busy people. I assume, like, you know what I mean? But yeah, so I really do feel for anyone who like might be in that situation, but it's just like, it sucks. But there's so many people in the world. You're bound to have like the same idea as someone else. And people keep bringing up the Spice Girls song like as sort of like, oh my God, that's like the craziest part of this is the Spice Girls song. And both of these movies are about a couple who's been like, I guess, spoiler alert, it's not spoiler, I haven't seen it, but about a couple who is like fused together, basically. So like romantic couple, they start becoming stuck together. And the Spice Girls song is To Become One. And I'm like, if you're like a millennial of a certain age, like that's the song, you know what I mean? It doesn't surprise me that like two different people would separately, independently come up with that. So
yeah,
but I feel for anyone in the situation, but it's not it.
It's gotta suck.
Yeah.
I really question. I do question like why did Studio Fest do this lawsuit? It's gotta be. It sounds to me like a waste of money. Potentially it's even their own like marketing strategy to get more eyes on like their movie and like put it out into the world.
Hey.
But also like, why wouldn't you just do that on social media instead of having to do like a lawsuit about it? I don't know. The whole thing just rings weird to me. But I do think that the lawsuit will be thrown out. I don't think that there's much merit here.
I agree. All right. I think we did it. First pod back,
Woo!
Baby.
Back in the saddle.
Woo-hoo!
Feels good. Feels good.
Feels good. I do feel good. You know, I was tired when we started, but I'm awake now.
Yeah.
Feeling alive.
Yeah. I mean, Sammie, you must have gone weeks without anybody calling you on your shit. Nobody was pushing back.
Did you call me on my shit this episode?
No, I didn't. I eased us back into the flow, but nobody was pushing back on your takes.
Actually, I can't say what movie it was because I still think I'm under embargo technically. But me and Cameron like slightly disagreed on a movie that we saw a week ago, and I was like, wow, this never happens.
Oh, wow.
It was a very slight disagreement. It wasn't a big one, but one of my friends one time called us out because our Letterboxd ratings are always like within a half star.
Oh my God.
We have very similar tastes. And I was like, wow, she's going to be so happy when she sees this one.
That's exciting. I'll keep an eye peeled as to what this was. Well, this has been fabulous, Sammie. Do you have anything to plug?
Oh, I do. Speaking of Cameron, his short film Swapped at Length is premiering at the Georgia Shorts Film Festival on Sunday. It's in Block E. It's a pretty cheap ticket. You can buy like a full day pass for all the blocks, or you can just buy particular blocks. So if you want to see everything, do that. If you don't want to see everything, you just want to see Swapped, you can do that in Block E. And that is on Sunday, May 26th. There we go. May 26th. What are dates?
Yes, Sunday, May 26th. I will be there. I have my ticket.
Awesome.
It'll be great. And if you are listening to this, then tomorrow night, I encourage you to please come down to the Plaza Theater, where I, through Behind the Slate podcast, will be presenting a special screening of the new 4K restoration of With Nell and I, one of my absolute favorite movies, one of the greatest scripts ever written. Certainly not a word was plagiarized because it couldn't possibly be. This script is so unique and original. And what is very, very exciting is I got contacted by an absolute legend a cinema legend, stills photographer Murray Close, who shot the original stills for With Nolan and I. Not to mention he shot the original stills for Jurassic Park, The Shining, Mission Impossible, The Hunger Games, the Harry Potter movies. He's worked on the last 2 Alex Garland films. I mean, the guy is an absolute legend, has been on some of the most legendary sets in the history of cinema. He is going to be in the building. He's going to be at the Plaza. He's going to be doing a Q&A afterwards. He is going to tell us what that set was really, really like. He was there and he caught some of the most iconic, beautiful images that I have ever seen from this movie, not to mention all these other films. So Murray Close is going to be there. It's at 7:30 p.m. Thursday, May 22nd at the Plaza Theater. Come on down. It is going to be an amazing night.
I was going to say, I wish I could be there. I got a movie for work, but I'll be there in spirit. But
Be there in spirit. Be there in spirit. That's that'll be okay too. This has been wonderful, Sammie.
This has been great.
Great to talk to you. It's so good to be back. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, rate, review. Hit us with those 5 stars. Leave a little comment. Those little reviews on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, really go a long way to help us out. This has been wonderful, Sammie. And until next week, I will talk to you later.
Till next week. See ya.